All right, this lesson is going to be about using multiple exposure photography in camera. It's going to give you a general overview on what it means, what it looks like, as well as how to find the settings in your camera. My name is Amy Horn, and I'm going to take you through all of these different settings. So to start off with, multiple exposure photography has often been referred to anywhere as simple as double exposures, where you can add textures as an overlay, as well as analog cameras, film cameras. You could roll back the film to create a double or triple exposure. But here, when it comes to mirrorless and DSLRs, it can all be done in camera. Multiple exposure also is included in that category is compositing in Photoshop. So taking multiple random images, using layers and masking, and combining different images. So you can certainly achieve the vision you have. Additionally, these images have over 10 different images. The one on the left actually has 20 different images, and using a series of masking techniques just to make sure I have a finished product of exactly what I want to show up in the entire scene. So there's quite a range when we talk about multiple exposure photography. But what this lesson is going to be about is really using in-camera multiple exposure. So ever since DSLRs, and now especially with mirrorless cameras, almost every camera has an in-camera multiple exposure setting. And these settings are very easy to use. There's multiple different modes and overlay techniques that I will walk you through as an overview here today. Along with the cameras that are out today, as of this recording, Sony does not have this feature, but pretty much every other mirrorless camera does. And like I said, many DSLRs as well. And Olympus has the setting, but it's a little more limited than some of the other cameras. So let's talk about the terminology. So we've got a couple of different things going on this slide, and I'm going to walk you through on a camera so you can really see the difference in what each of these modes mean. But we're going to start off with multiple exposure on. It refers to a series, or on as a single photo. I am using a Nikon Z6 III, so that's the menu I'm going to be showing you in the terminology. Whatever you have, Canon, Olympus, whatever it is, you're going to have some similarities, but your terminology might be slightly different. So it would be a good thing to pull up your camera manual. So instead of just reading this slide, let's take a look in the camera what this information really means. So here I am live in my camera. I've got a little scene with a Lego sunflower setup, and looking through the viewfinder. So I'm going to go to my menu real quick. And if I want to find the multiple exposure setting in my camera, most cameras, it's under the photo shooting menu. So notice that icon of a camera. And then as I scroll, in my case, all the way down towards the bottom, I will get multiple exposure. And there it is. When I toggle over to the right, I can turn it on or off. Here's all of the different settings just for multiple exposure. So if I continue on, I go on, off, and notice on has two options, single photo or series. So what they're referring to is your final output. Do you want one single photo? So you're going to take one series of multiple exposure, or do you want to just continuously all day, today, tomorrow, always be capturing multiple exposures? If you always want to be capturing multiple exposures, that would be these series. So you're just going to do one series after another. If you just want one series of 4 or 8 or however many images, you would choose the single photo. So I'm going to choose single photo for right now. And I'm going to limit it to 3 images, but you'll notice most cameras have up to 10 as your capability. I'm just going to keep it as 3 to keep it simple here in the demonstration. Now, overlay mode, there are several overlay modes. I'll go through those in a little bit more detail in a minute, but I'm going to start off with average, because average is the simplest and most successful for beginners. So starting with average makes the most sense. And then I have a few other options. One, do I want to save each individual picture as I take it? So I'm taking 3 shots. The camera is going to combine them as multi-exposure. If I ever want to look back at those raw images as individual images, I would need to toggle this to on. I love control. I love having everything from the beginning, especially maybe I want to overlay one of these original images again onto my photo and do that in Photoshop. So I want to always keep my raw. That's my preference. Lastly, overlay shooting. Overlay shooting allows you to get a transparent, visible scene of what you are capturing. And I'll demo that in just a moment. The last thing, select the first exposure. You can actually pick an image that's currently on your camera. So I'll demo that as well. So right now, most importantly, 3 shots, multiple exposures on, we're ready to go. So I'm going to take a single picture here. And then when I'm ready to take the next one, I'm going to hold down my shutter part way. I'm going to move the camera over. So this is that overlay shooting. I see a transparent image of what was already captured. I'm going to take a second image. So that's 2 of 3. And it always gives me that preview of that last image I shot. I'm going to focus and I'm going to move it over here. So I'm going to have 3 vases and I take the picture. That's my third multiple exposure image. Now I can play it back. And there is my final version. So I have all 3 images. The computer has overlaid them. But if I look back in my playback folder one more time, I have all the original images as well. So those are all the original RAWs. Okay, so let's take a look now back at this menu setting. My multiple exposure setting turned off because I had it just as a single photo. We're going to do that one more time with 3 shots. And this time, notice as I look through my screen in the top right-hand corner, there is 2 squares, 2 rectangles with the number 3. So that's my indicator that I'm in multiple exposure mode. So most cameras also have that option as well. Before I actually take more, I'm going to go back to my multiple exposure setting. I'm going to just turn it off real quick and show you one other little shortcut way to find your multiple exposure setting. So most all cameras today have what's called a custom menu. So in my case, it's called My Menu. So I have set up multiple exposure to be in that My Menu. So anything I frequently am adjusting on my camera is in my custom menu. So you can read your manual and figure out how to do that as well. Now I'm going to turn it on, but this time I'm going to go ahead and add select first exposure. So I'm going to pull up a photo that was already on my camera. So this picture of red leaves. I'm going to click OK for that. And now when I go to take my picture, I already see 1 of 3 is the leaves. Here's number 2. And this time I'm going to zoom just a little bit and take another one. And then when I play back the image, now I have all of those images, all 3 in one. So that again is the average mode. Average mode lets you see, it averages out the lights and the darks from each of the images, giving you a nice blend, but you're always going to end up with something properly exposed. If you shoot the additive menu or method, that doesn't do quite the same thing. There's a little more of a thought process to it. So let's go back to here and take a look at the different settings here. So I mentioned the on-off, the series versus single photo. Now, when it comes to the general overlay mode, you have these different settings. Your camera, like for instance, Olympus doesn't have all 4 of these settings, but it does have 2 of them. So if you have something slightly different, or Canon might call it something slightly different, go ahead and take a look at your manual and look at the explanation. But additive, the exposures are all overlaid without modification. There's no gain that's adjusted. So as you make a cumulative effort of more and more images, you have the risk of having an overexposure. Average, like I said, is one of the easiest to start with because all of the lights and darks are averaged based on how you've programmed your camera. So you're always going to have a properly exposed image. Lighten, it compares the pixels in each exposure and uses only the brightest. Darken uses only the darkest. And then of course that overlay shooting allows you to see that ghosted image. So let's take a look at what all those mean in sample images. So starting off the average mode, again, that easiest mode gives you a good exposure. Here's 2 samples. And then here are some examples of what it looked like capturing the images. So the 6 images to the left part of the screen are examples of what I shot. I was rotating just slightly left or right, moving around the tree just a little bit, and always focusing on the same spot on the tree. That's my preference because I like to have something that's a little bit sharper in the frame. So for instance, it was this part of the trunk that I'm trying to always keep in focus and keep kind of centralized in my image. A couple more examples. In this one, I moved forward, moved back, zoomed in, zoomed out. I even shot an image that was slightly out of focus. And I like to do that quite often because I find that just sort of fills in if there's a blank area. And so in this case, I took 8 images using the average mode, and this is what the camera generated. So in my opinion, a strong impressionistic feel to it, leads a little more interest to the viewer because they're trying to kind of break down the image, figure out what it is. But again, I still always like to have something in focus. Otherwise, I feel it creates too much tension for the viewer. Yet another example, 8 images on the left, walking up and down the hill, left and right, zooming in and zooming out just slightly in order to get the finished image. Things I was cautious about, I had taken a few series prior to the spinal version, and things I was very conscious of is the trees in the background. If they were in too many of the frames, they became too dominant. So I made a point of, in several of them, you know, the dominance is really these 2 foreground trees, which is what I wanted. And you can also get not just walk around a tree like I showed you in the previous scene, but maybe a flower garden, taking different snippets of that entire flower garden. So you can change your focus point. In this case, I was focusing in on different flowers and created, you know, this really soft feeling image over here where I get all the colors, get a wide variety of the shapes and sizes and types of flowers. Now, this image seems to me like a little, I guess I'll use the word hazy. So this would be a great image. I could pull into Photoshop the finished product. I could grab one of these others, add it as a layer on top, change the opacity, but just maybe bring back a little bit of this detail, or maybe just a little bit of the purple tall ones here, just to get a little bit sharper interest, sharper focal point. And that's why I keep all the raw images. So I always have that option to do it. All right, additive mode. This is the mode that I mentioned. If you don't do any adjustments, you can have an overexposed image. So both of these are examples of finished products. And depending on the total number of images you're shooting, the first image is going to be, say, 1 stop under, or 0.7 if you're only doing 2 images. 1 stop under for the first image. That way you have something that's a little bit more dominant in the frame. And then each subsequent image is going to be quite a bit darker depending on the number of images. So if I were shooting 8 images total, the first one is 1 stop under. Each additional image is around 3 stops, sometimes 3.3 stops underexposed. So what does this look like? Here's an example of the wrong way. And this is not doing the exposure compensation. So I forgot. I just shot all of them in additive mode and didn't make any adjustments. And like I said, it's going to take the accumulation of all of the exposures. And so you're going to end up with an overexposed image. Now, the one thing, if you're using that overlay mode where you can see through your viewfinder, by the time you get to about the 3rd or 4th image, you're going to see it gets really bright in your monitors, in your viewfinder. So you're going to know that you're doing something wrong. You can stop the multi-exposure at that point in time. Many cameras have a shortcut key for it. You can even just go straight into the setting and turn it off, and it will just end the exposure, multiple exposure right at that point. So this is the wrong way to do additive mode, but here's the right way. So my first image shot at 1 stop underexposed. You can see that's the dominant shape that you see in this frame. And then each subsequent image, I was always trying to keep focus on the center trunk in all of these images. And like I've mentioned before, I also have one that's out of focus, completely unfocused image as I walked around the tree and shot different images. Here's another example using architecture. Again, I'm still trying to keep something in focus. So I tried to focus mostly on the door. One stop under, 3 or 3 1/3 stops for each additional image. And this is the final product. I just cropped it up just a little bit. Now, there's 2 other modes, Darken and Lighten mode. And if you remember from the previous slide, Darken mode uses only the darkest pixels. So you can see my first shot, I actually just rotated the camera a 1/4 turn for each image. And it kept all the darkest. So anywhere that a dark pixel, once you combine all 4 of them, is overlaid on top of a lighter pixel, it's going to ignore the light. It's only going to keep the dark. So this is my finished product over here. Now you do get a little bit of interesting artifacting back here. Some people like, some people don't like, but I do like the graphic nature of this image. My preference is normally using additive or average mode. That just seems to work best with the subjects I have found. But I think Darken mode has some very interesting aspects to it. Now, let's go back to our sample with the Lego sunflowers. In Darken mode, if you're capturing 3 images like I did here, and in each case, the base is offset slightly. Darken mode, again, it's going to only keep the darkest pixels. So in that case, you're not going to get quite as much information when it comes to the bright areas on the vase, because as you layer each image, some of the dark areas of that background has overlaid on top of it. However, if I use Darken mode and change the background to white, I now get a much clearer image of multiple subjects. So depending on what I'm after, the color of my background, if I have a really dominant light or dark background, then Darken or Lighten mode might be your best choice as opposed to additive or average. Now let's take a look at Lighten mode. So just like Darken, except it's doing the opposite. It keeps the lightest pixels. So as you compare the sunflowers and the white background, as I move the camera around, capturing different images, as all of these layers lay on top of one another, it's going to keep the lightest of all the pixels. So that's why you have a pretty ghosted finished product here, because with all the white background and the rotation, there's not going to be many pixels left over that are dark. However, if I change the background to black, now I'm going to get a much brighter image. So imagine a night scene. If you're wanting to get quite a bit of neon lights in an image, Lighten mode would probably be your best bet, because the darkness of the nature of nighttime is not going to show up in the image. Now, if you want to combine 2 unrelated subjects, here's another example of what Lighten and Darken looks like and how to compare it. So in both cases, I've taken a picture of a towel. And so once these 2 are combined, can you visualize what the image will look like? So for Lighten mode, you want to figure out where are the lightest pixels. So for instance, is this lighter than this gray? Is this lighter than the sunflower? Is it lighter than the white area? So that's what happens in camera when you use Lighten mode. It's going to just keep the lightest values, the lightest pixels. Reverse when it comes to Darken. So we've got same picture of a towel, and then we have the sunflower. Where are the darkest pixels? Here we go. So depending on what your background is, what your intent is, if you're wanting to add textures, there are some really interesting aspects to utilizing Lighten and Darken modes. All right, as I mentioned before, you can also use Photoshop to mask back details. So these 3 sample images, image on the left was all flowers. They were all a little softer, but I masked back from the original frame a little bit more of these two daisies just to get a little bit more sharpness and clarity. Same thing on this one with the chive head. I went ahead and masked back a little bit of that purple right here. And on the heron, I wanted to mask back the head. It was all, there was not enough for a viewer to get sharp focus and know what the clear subject was. So after I had my multiple exposure of 8 images, I just took one of the images with the head up here, put a mask, and I just revealed just a touch of that heron head. All right, so that's just that quick overview of how to use multiple exposure in camera. Go ahead and open up your camera and see if you can find it on your camera.